everybody. Good to be with you guys. This is our daily devotional for today. My name is Kirk, one of the pastors at Emergence here. Today we're in Acts chapter 17, verses 16 to 34. A lot to cover, and we're going to see a couple just really cool insights today. One regarding worship, also regarding just Paul's ability to contextualize and understand and engage the culture for the gospel. So start just real quick with a story of talking to my daughter in last night, and we were praying, and she had this ridiculous idea of saying, what if we're praying to our dog Duke? And I said, well, that's not the case at all, because our dog Duke is kind of a knucklehead. And she said, well, what if Duke is God? I'm like, well, Duke isn't God. Let me just be clear with you. But there was a time, or there are people who worship things, and maybe in a way that they maybe see them as God. So she was trying to help me with this passage, of course. And today, speaking into that, we see Paul. He goes to Athens, and he's looking around. He sees that they've made gods out of everything. They've made gods out of everything, the people there. He's observing, he's taking things in, and he realizes, like, these people are worshipers, right? They're big time worshipers. But the challenge, like my daughter thinking the dog was, she doesn't really think that, but the object of their worship was misplaced, right? And in fact, their worship, they worship so many things that it's hard to keep track of, who is God, right? And they're worshiping, like Paul says later on, worshiping the creation over the creator. This is a pantheistic culture. God to them is universe. God is nature. God is found in these objects, and just a satirical writing of the time says this. It says, it's easier to find a god in Athens than it is to find a man. Right? It's easier to find a god in Athens than it is a man. It means worshiping everything. And so Paul sees that, and he recognizes that, he observes it, and he recognizes also just the Greek culture is one of thought. He does his research, right? And he takes things in. He doesn't just immediately just give his thoughts, right? He takes things in, and he realizes that I need to reason with these people, that the Greek culture is one of thought. And so he approaches and he reasons in love. And that's a really valuable way to approach, right? How different I think our climate is today, where we're not really able to do that. People are so angry, and they forget to reason with love and sit behind a computer screen and attack and bully and troll one another. And Paul's just reminding us, we can reason in love. Especially as Christians, we're able to reason in love. We have the truth. We don't need to boast in it, but we can reason with people and love them through it. And so here we go. It's a long passage. I'm going to try my best to read it. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him, and he saw the city was full of idols, like we talked about, the worshiping. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him, and they brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know that what this new teaching is that you are presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. Now all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. So Paul, standing in the midst of Areopagus, said, men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, and I found that also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives all to mankind, life and breath and everything. He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and hope that they might feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being, even as some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that divine being is like gold or silver or stone or image formed by the art of the imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by man who he has appointed, and as of this has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others we'll hear you again about this. So Paul went out from their midst, but some men joined him and believed. Among those were Dionysius the Areopagus and women named Damaris and others with them. So a lot going on there. Great passage. So many things to kind of take away. But just Paul is with the culture. He's engaged in the culture. Doesn't mean he is the culture, right? But he is culturally sensible. Right? He understands the culture. He takes time to say, what do people worship, right? What do people in our culture worship? For us, people maybe worship status, right? They worship just the idea of having material items. They worship things like their marriage or their children, the misplaced worship, right? And these are things that we can appreciate, but they're not things that we are putting our adoration in, right? Because it's the creation over the creator. And as Christians, we know the truth of what the Creator has done. And our worship is response to what Jesus has done through his grace, right? And so Paul, he sees these philosophers come over, and these guys are pretty big time. And they look at Paul like, what is this guy babbling about? These are the top thinkers, they and God just showing his power through Paul. They see him as foolish, right? But God exposes the emptiness of hope and human wisdom, right? It's like chasing after the wind. And so the cross, right, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians, seems foolish to these guys, especially to the Greeks who they look for wisdom, right? And to them, they can't understand. But like I said, Paul understands the culture, and he even operates in a countercultural way, but he meets them by understanding the culture first, right? How do we become countercultural? One of the visions that emerges is counterculture if we don't know the culture, right? If we don't know what's counter to it. So we have to know and engage it. Like I said, we don't have to be of the culture, but we can engage it. We know what that looks like. And so the last thing Paul talks about is just the worship, right? He says, you have this unknown God. I'll tell you who he is. It's Jesus, right? And he shares about the resurrection. And it's so easy to just at times see our worship just be misplaced, right? Our hearts, they long to worship. They're created to worship. They're designed to worship. Sometimes we worship things like sports or whatever, music or whatever. And yet Paul's saying the true object of your worship is really the God who created us, the God who designed us to worship, and his redeeming work through Jesus Christ. And so Paul quotes even a poem by Zeus, where it says that in him we move and have our being, right? That's not necessarily in this context right there. He's saying about that's God, but Paul's saying I can redeem that. That actually is about Jesus, not about Zeus. It's about Jesus. He is the one. And so Paul shares that. He reasons in love this account. He reasons in love because he loves people. And here's the truth. Even as he shares this, there are people who want to hear more. They want to hear more about Jesus. And there's some who just turn their back to their idols. And that can be true of just our evangelism, the time we spend with people. Some will definitely respond and we celebrate, and there's some who will reject. But our call is to share. Our call is to reason in love for the glory of God. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys have a great day.